is the Revisionary Podcast with your host, Juan Carlos. The Revisionary Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Revisionary Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Juan Carlos. If this is your first time listening, the way this works is we bring on comedians, well, usually they're comedians anyway, who tell a nonfiction story about their lives in which they wish things had gone a little bit differently. Afterwards, I give them an opportunity to tell the same exact story, except the second time, they can change any fact or details that they would like about the story, and then we discuss the impact of the changes that they've made to their story. This week, we actually have Keith Graber joining us, and I'm really excited that he's decided to join us. So here's a true story about Keith. Believe it or not, most of the time when I do this, it's either people who I know from having done stand-up with or, have just met through the comedy community. But very often, I'm meeting people for the first time when we sit down to record these episodes, which is a lot of fun for me. And I think you guys can kind of tell the difference when I'm meeting someone for the first time, because sometimes we vibe, and other times it's a little bit differently. But with Keith, I had actually never met him before, except that we went on to record, this episode of the podcast. I think we tried to record it last week or 2 weeks ago. And for whatever reason, I started having all these technical difficulties. So we could not record the episode. So I got to meet him, but we didn't record. So I actually get to sit down with him again. And finally, I'll get to hear his story. So that's really exciting because I haven't heard his story. I don't know what he's going to talk about, despite the fact that we did try to connect to record this episode. It just didn't work out. But here we go. Let's go ahead and see if we can get Keith on the line. Hello, Keith. How are you?
Good. How you doing, Juan Carlos?
I am doing phenomenal. Welcome to the Revisionary Studios. Woo woo.
It's good to be here. Your studio looks a lot like my studio. It's fun.
Yeah, so here's the thing about my studio. It's actually really just your apartment. I just convince you that you're in a different place.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's how this works. Don't worry about it.
It's the beauty of the digital world.
Yeah, right? It's funny how I feel like 10 years ago, if we had told people, you know what? We're just going to choose an entire 1.5 block where no one's going to go outside. We're just all going to talk to each other via video, and we're going to forget what human touch feels like.
Mm-hmm. I got to be honest, I'm kind of about this, man. I like the fact that right now, if I want to travel, all I have to do is change my shirt. That's it. And
yeah.
I'm in a new place, new time with new people, and it's fun, and they don't even know the difference.
What I'm really into is this whole work from home thing. I love that my commute is literally the second bedroom, because I'm sitting here and I'm realizing, why would I ever go to an office? Why am I spending money on gas? Why am I spending money in traffic? Why are we doing this to our environment? It's very clear we can all just work from home. Let's make that a thing.
Totally. But the backfire is when you're late one day, you got really no excuse.
I mean, yeah, but I'm saying, look, if your commute is 2 seconds to your computer, you really shouldn't be late. That's on you.
They say the closer it is, the more likelihood of you being late. So
I believe that. I had a job where my commute, I think, was 6 minutes.
Uh-huh.
I was consistently late every single day.
I have the same experience, and that actually ties into my story today.
Really? Well, so we'll touch on that. So just for background, why don't you tell the Revisionaries a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm a comedian, a writer, probably a bunch of other things. I don't know. I'm a private chef. I work as a chef. I do that for a living, for the pay. I don't do it for the love. I kind of don't love food. I don't love smelling like food. That's, I think, the thing. My dog does. He loves it. But I kind of get sick of, the grind of just always pumping out food. I feel like some sort of, food robot or something. But yeah, I want to make comedy my full-time career in any capacity whatsoever. I would probably describe myself as like a comedy Swiss Army knife. I sort of have interests in just about every single facet of comedy, whether it be stand-up or sketch or improv or musical comedy. Even, I don't know, like I want to, I think my goal is probably to get a writing job. on a TV show, maybe like a Rick and Morty or a late night thing. I don't know.
Have you written a spec script yet?
I did a submission recently, and which everyone on planet Earth also did. So
before we go any further, hold on. You mind telling everyone what that is?
They know what it is. It's
not all of them.
I did the Jon Stewart packet, which I think if you're out there listening, you also did the Jon Stewart packet or know someone who did the Jon Stewart packet. Jon Stewart has a new show coming up, and they sent out that submission. That was fun to do, and it's a good challenge, good writing challenge. And what was cool about that is they picked a certain date, and they said non-evergreen jokes, only topical jokes on this particular, whatever's in the news on that day. And so it felt like the writing demands of actually being in a writer's room for that type of show, where I had to open up the laptop. I couldn't do any prep work, and I had to wait until, the news stories aren't out until that day. Mm-hmm. And, I'm in Los Angeles, so I get a 3-hour non-head start, post start on the, so I got to wake up, either got to get up at 5 or be behind everybody. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was fun. It was a good grind. It was a good exercise, a good mental challenge for myself. And I don't know, I was happy with the packet. I write and produce sort of a comedy game show. We all do our shows, right? And I have that on YouTube, and it's a little bit topical headline news in one of the rounds. So I like, getting in some of the headlines and making fun of the celebrities and all that kind of fun stuff. I get a little political here and there. But yeah, it was good. It was fun. It was really nice to do that, and I need to do it more. Being in that Swiss Army knife category is the downside is you've got a lot of pokers and a lot of different fires, and you're just, keeping up with one thing or another is like, it's you don't have as much of a focused life and a focused attack on your career choice. So
we, first and foremost, I want to again thank you for coming on the Revisionary podcast, but why don't we go ahead and jump right into this, Keith? The stage is yours. Go ahead and tell us your story.
Okay, so my story takes us off to the magical land of New Zealand.
Ooh.
Some of you may have heard of it.
Fancy.
Okay. Yeah, so it is kind of fancy. I still talk to my friend from New Zealand from time to time, and he always argues with me that it's not fancy because he lives in a little bit of a podunk kind of town. But
right.
It is fancy to us. It's like, I try to instill in him, like, yo, we have podunk towns too. We don't have magical waterfalls, bro.
Right.
It's a better podunk still, So I grew up in Philly, and I grew up in sort of a not so nice neighborhood, and a little sort of a poor, just urban background, row homes, crime, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And
in New Zealand?
In Philly. I grew up.
Sorry, in Philly. I got confused.
Yeah. So, and then I started to, in my 20s, my early 20s, I started getting in. That's when I started cooking for a living. And I worked at a few restaurants. And then, I said, I got to get out of here. I don't want to be in Philly anymore. I want to travel. And so I ended up in the furthest possible place away, which is New Zealand, right? And I'm trying to set up some of the, background. You need
Sure.
a couple of things about my background in order to truly understand this story and appreciate the nuance. This is everything that I like, every storytelling that I like to do in my comedy or even in conversation is always about like shame and embarrassment.
Okay.
Because I don't know why, those are my most and least favorite moments in my life. Like they entertain me, about myself.
Right.
It's also like, I wish I could change that, but do I really want to? Because it's so hilarious. But okay, so Here's the thing. I hesitate to call this summering because summering as a verb, because when you're poor, whiskey tango in Philly, you don't really summer. But
hold on, let's back up. What is summering?
Right, exactly. Summering is, when you go somewhere for the summer, when you go on vacation, you have a second home.
Is that a thing?
That is a thing for rich people. Okay, so the poor person version of that in Philly is you have a cat. We start out with just a trailer in the Poconos, in like a campground, So, I mean, when I say trailer, it was a small trailer we started out. So we were basically, summering trailer trash in the Poconos.
So for those of you revisionaries who are listening out there, am I the only one who think he's humbly flexing here? Because
is that a humble brag?
I don't know, because yeah, it's a trailer, but bro, you got 2 homes. You know what I'm saying? Like,
kind of. Okay, so it really was. My dad was a hunter. He liked to go hunting in the woods in the Poconos. If you're from the East Coast, you're gonna get this a little bit. You're gonna be like, yeah, no, it's not that great, pal. But he did. So he had this like little trailer just so he could like stay there, and so we'd go from our row home to a trailer in the woods is basically what we do. And we had the two things. And the trailer in the woods was on rented land. Like it was like a couple $100 a year or something. It was like, that's how this is the lowest end of summering. Okay. But the point being that I actually have like, you wouldn't know it from maybe looking at me, but I actually have a solid like Boy Scouting background.
Okay.
Every summer in Philly, we'd get away, and we kind of got away because of the crime. Like my dad didn't want us, both my parents didn't want us to get like, away from school and like the gangs and
yeah,
stealing.
Were you an at-risk youth?
Car parts? Not really, because my parents did keep after it when we were kids. But I did fight a lot. We did, like in Philly, you can't not fight. Fights find you, and I remember in Philly like being, I want to say 7, 8 years old in a fight at nighttime.
Yeah.
The middle of an intersection, not even in the street, in the middle of an intersection with like 20 people. I was fighting another 8-year-old kid, and there's like 20 people circling, like cheering us on, like it's like Fight Club. And there were adults watching us. That's how weird and rough Philly can be.
Did you lose?
I actually won that fight. I was a badass when I was young. I started to chill out, and I was like, hey man, can't we all get along? And like, it didn't, yeah.
All right.
So anyway, I have a background of being in the woods.
Sure.
All summer long. I know how all the Boy Scout things. I know how to light fires, pitch tents and whatever, all the stuff. Go fishing, look for bait, all that, everything that I could be a survivalist if I wanted to. Okay, so we go to New Zealand. I'm in New Zealand. I had to get away from Philly. I don't like Philly anymore, right? I go to New Zealand. I actually live in New Zealand for 3 years, okay?
Just out of curiosity, I'm sorry to keep interrupting. I'm just trying to find clarifications here.
Yeah.
How does one go from roughing it in Philly to all of a sudden just moving to New Zealand? Like, how did we get there?
Okay, I worked at a restaurant, and a woman who I started dating also worked there, and she was a chef as well, and she left to move to New Zealand. So I after maybe 6 months of working there, we had a relationship, and she's like, hey, I'm going to New Zealand. And I said, and okay, and then wow, and then I was like, I don't like Philly. I might as well go with her and check out, New Zealand. Why not? So I sold all my stuff. I didn't really have that much stuff. I was a schmucky, like 22-year-old kid. So didn't really have much that was worth anything. And then took all my money, which was almost nothing as well, and went to New Zealand and just kind of worked as I went and backpacked a little, toured around and,
Wait. So did you just show up and the country of New Zealand was like, welcome here, you can live here now? Is that how that happened?
They have a visitor's permit that they give you that's good for up to 9 months upon arrival. At that time, it may be different now.
Right.
It wasn't. I didn't have to apply for a visa. You have to apply for a visa if you have a planned stay that's more than that. But it's weird. Like the overlaps in the rules were kind of like loopholes in a way. So you can show up. You get an automatic visitor's permit if there's no issues with your status, if you're not on a no-fly list or anything, which it was pre 9/11, so they didn't have a lot of that stuff. And they give you the visitor's permit, and you can keep renewing that, I think, for up to 2 years.
I see.
I did it for like a year and like 3 months, and then left, and then went back for another just about 2 years. So, and then did a full stay again on a visitor's permit. So, I go to New Zealand. I do a little bit of backpacking and meet up with my girlfriend from Philly. We stay together probably, I think, another 6-9 months, and then we break up, for whatever reason. And then I'm like, I kind of like it here. I'm going to stay some more. And then, so she left and went back to Philly, and I met another girl, and we started dating, and we had a pretty good relationship. It was solid for a while. So I would occasionally stay with her family. I didn't have anywhere. I didn't have anyone there. It was just like, if you made friends with me, I was staying at your house. Like, sorry, pal, but there's nothing. Like, where do I put this bag?
You're my family now.
Friend? Yeah. It was just like, not a smart move. If like people would avoid eye contact. So there's a certain point where I was sort of staying with her for a while, and she still lived with, she was like a year or two younger than me, and she still lived with her family. And so I would stay with them, and then sometimes we'd go back to a different area and stay in, just get like a room in a flat, somewhere. But there was a point at which we were staying with her family, and then we went to, again, we're going to go back to summering, and this is why it's important. We went to, they have a slightly more upscale version of summering in New Zealand, and her family had what they call a batch, and I believe it's short for bachelor pad, sort of, but I could be wrong on that. But it's sort of like the same thing where it's a summer home or cabin, like an Airbnb sort of.
Did it feel fancier because they have accents? I'm just trying to figure this out.
It felt, New Zealand is surprisingly not that fancy. I wouldn't call it fancy, but it's definitely more, let's say, somewhere in between the words civilized and sophisticated. They're
Posh?
not. Yeah, they're not exactly bougie, but they're definitely more well-behaved than most of the people that I know in America.
Right.
Especially on the East Coast. So I probably cursed a lot more than most of the people were accustomed to. But they have their own charms. They have their own sort of podunk attitudes and behaviors here and there. So their batch was in an area of New Zealand, which is a really beautiful area called the Marlborough Sounds. There's sort of this like mountainous regions where the, ocean water kind of fills up between the hills and stuff. So it's really cool. People own little properties there, and they go there for vacations, for weekends, summering the verb. And, usually you have a little spot on the hill in the woods, and then there's a path down to the like a beach. And it's not like a sandy beach. It's more of like a rocky sort of the beach, kind of beach you would see at a lake or something like that, Okay. Another fun fact, I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, right?
Okay.
And that's another thing I inherited from my dad, that he was like, why? It's gross, and I was like, okay, so I won't do it. And I'm glad I never did it. But because I never enjoyed the smoking process, I'd never smoked weed with all of my friends in Philly. I was like, I don't smoke. But I would eat it. I would eat weed. And
right.
This is before they actually had the serious edibles. Like I was just taking chunks, or making tea or something stupid. So if you've ever had edibles, it puts you out. Like it's a weird experience, right?
I mean, I've heard about it from other people, but I don't know anything about it. To be honest with you, until this very conversation we're having now, I didn't even know you could put THC in tea.
It doesn't really work that well. This is before the days of the very sophisticated edibles we have now. So I would make tea in this coffee, like a cappuccino machine, and it would squirt out the sides, and And all my friends would be like, you're just, like Gollum, like, he ruins it, like. So another New Zealand reference, I gotta throw them in there. And so but the thing about when you eat wheat is you can expect to just be like, planted on the couch. Probably you're gonna go out at some point, and
sure,
it's a way more of a couch trip, velvet poster, Dark Side of the Moon kind of
on edibles
scenario. Yeah. Like you plan it. You're like, I'm gonna eat this thing at 7 p.m. It's gonna hit by 8. I'm gonna have a couple of hours of fun, and then I'm gonna get a good night's sleep, and that's how this night's gonna go. But okay, so this girlfriend, for whatever reason, I changed my rule and I started smoking weed with her, and it was kind of enjoyable. And I hadn't been doing it that much, and so there was typical stoner rules. It's like, whatever, like if you can sneak away at lunchtime, let's go smoke some weed. There's wake and bakers, there's all this other stuff. I'm like, okay, I've never waked and ate an edible. It's like, I'm just going back to bed if that's the case,
Right. I mean, yeah.
So, so we would smoke occasionally, right? And I'm still
okay.
And so there was one day where she's like, "Hey, let's go down the beach and let's smoke some weed." And fine, okay, it's fun, So we're down there, smoke a little weed, and her parents were cool. We weren't really like worried that much about being caught, but it's still like I'm the American, I'm the guy dating their daughter,
Right.
I'm still trying to find some inroads here, And so we're smoking weed on the beach, just walking around, having fun, like everything's sparkly and whatever. And then so we're walking back towards the house that they summer in.
Yeah.
And then we see her dad. And okay, so they also had a 14-year-old girl who was an exchange student from Norway. Like,
exchange for what? Like,
right.
what, like cultural relations? What's going on?
It technically wasn't an exchange student because that family themselves didn't exchange a student, but they had a similar program where students from New Zealand could go abroad and students from other countries. And so there was a program. It was almost like fostering, but
no, but what was the point? Was it to learn about New Zealand culture?
Yeah. Are you familiar with the exchange students?
I mean, as far as I know, it's like trading places. Two kids get to go to each other's schools.
Yeah, traditionally that's what it's like. It's almost like trading, like a wife swap, but for the kid in the family. But it in New Zealand, they basically had a broader system where it wasn't a direct swap for a family member. You would just sign up and be approved as a family that would take on an exchange student from another country if they're and it's just like cultural experience, and I think they would still go to school and things like that.
Why would anyone do that?
I'll tell you what, I would have done it to get a free trip to New Zealand if I was.
No, right. If you're the student, I get that.
Yeah.
But like as a family, why would you want a young kid to have to be responsible for?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they got a benefit out of it. They were pretty well off. They weren't super rich, but they were a successful family. They had 3 daughters. And then maybe they just loved daughters. They want a 4th one. I don't know. And she was young. She was the youngest, So my girlfriend was the youngest sister. And then this girl was a few years younger. She was 14. I think she was 14. Yeah. And so she could speak a little English. She was nice. She wasn't very talkative. She was a little shy, and that's cool. I just was like, hey, nice to whatever. We didn't talk much. She had a pretty good relationship with the mom. And, she was just a nice kid. And I always got the vibe from a lot of just Europeans in general. They're just a little more life skilled than the average American I see.
I believe that.
Americans are a little bit more like, I know how to handle America, and I always get the vibe from Europeans. They're like, we know more about like physics and science and how the world works and, all that kind of stuff, different languages. Like, you guys, you're really good at being Americans, but, we're pretty good at being humans. So it was sort of that vibe. And then, so I get, we walk up, and again, I'm not terrified. It's not like seeing the cops and you're high. It's just,
right.
Like, do we really want to sit here and make eye contact and be like, in a weird conversation? Sorry.
Now, so just to have an understanding of, I guess, the culture in New Zealand, was like weed more socially acceptable back then in New Zealand, or was it a major no-no? Like, what was the vibe in terms of the country and the attitude towards weed?
It was, at that time, it was maybe a few years ahead of where we were in terms of less criminalized, but still not legal.
Okay.
So it was this is probably around the year 2000, 2001, and it was probably kind of how we were maybe 10 years later.
So you would have had a beer in front of her dad at the time, yes?
Yeah, I was over 21, yeah.
No, right. But that's what I'm saying. So you would have had a beer in front of him, but you would not have smoked weed in front of him, right? Just to get a sense of the...
No, and it was pretty much like maybe he knew, but, it definitely wouldn't be something that I wouldn't pass him a joint or anything.
But if you smoked cigarettes, would you have smoked a cigarette in front of him?
Probably. That's hard to say. Yeah.
I'm just trying to nail down, like,
exactly.
the general,
well, the
nuance.
The fact that we were sneaking away to smoke
tells you everything.
Yeah, but it was also a little bit of, this girlfriend was like, I don't know if you ever had a girlfriend or a friend where you go over their house and the rules are a little bit more relaxed, and you can, you can watch a dirty movie, or you can like drink a beer, and it's like you get trouble at home, but they're a little more cool with it. But you can't overdo it. Like, you can't have 2 beers. That's weird. Like, it's just another, stage of
right.
of liberalism, So they were a little more liberal than I was used to. I came from a little bit more of a strict parenting, Catholic background. So
we've come full circle. You started this whole story talking about how you were driven by guilt, and now you tell me you're Catholic. It all makes sense.
Yeah. There is a little bit of background Catholic guilt. I always feel like I should be doing better. I always, I'm like a kind of like Canadian apologizing here and there, because I'm like, I could have done better at this for you. I'm sorry, And I think maybe that's the Catholic guilt. Like, you're born wrong. You're born like, yeah, you already messed up. So, so we get back to, so we come across the dad and the 14-year-old Norwegian exchange student girl, and they're like, hey, you guys want to go for a boat ride in the rowboat? And
the student asked you?
No, the dad did. And
okay.
And it was a little bit like, I'm not going to say he was a mafia don, but it was a little bit like, you can't say no. you can't say, no, we're going to go, smoke another bowl?
Yeah.
And we're also trying to like act like we didn't, and there's no reason we shouldn't want to do that. And also, I'm trying to ingratiate myself a little bit with her dad. Like, it wouldn't hurt to be like, have some, bonding time with the old dad, so we're like, fine. And plus, we were high, and we were like, oh, boat ride sounds nice. Like, yeah, look at this place. It's magical. I'll take a boat ride. So we all get in this rowboat. He pushes it out. We're all sitting in there, and I'm like, looking over the side, like, this is nice. I could do this. I could, and then for whatever reason, for some, like, I guess it was like maybe it was an olive branch of male bonding or something. The dad, he looks at, because, I'm like, I'm a strapping young lad, I guess, at that. I'm this 22-year-old guy. I'm like dating his daughter, and he's in a boat, he's like, why don't you take the oars, Keith, and paddle for us, And he's sitting at the bow, looking like facing me, in like a rowboat, you kind of face each other.
Yeah.
And the 2 girls are in the back, and I'm like, okay. And then, so I need to say this for the folks at home. I know how to row a boat, okay? And so he
Revisionaries, if you're listening, he doesn't know how to row a boat. No, I'm just kidding.
We'll prove it sometime. We're going to do this in a rowboat. I'll bring my laptop into a rowboat. And, like, I'm not a paddle boat only guy. I know how to row a boat. I've rowed boats before. I've fished out of boats that I've rowed into lakes and ponds, so he gives me these oars. And I'm like, I was like going. I looked like a cheerleader who just did LSD or something.
One pom pom in front of the other.
Yeah, my arms just pumping in all directions, like I'm stirring. You know what I mean? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Can I do a figure 8 kind of pat? For whatever reason, I was so high, I could not row this boat. I could not work these oars like in unison with 2 arms. It was just for whatever reason. And I'm like, oh God, get this right. And looking at my hands. I'm like, why aren't you doing what that one's doing? You know? And he's looking at me like, what is he felt bad for me. And I in my head, I'm thinking like, do I say it's because I'm high or because I'm a chump? Like, I don't know which one is worse right now.
Right.
To do. And okay, that's not the worst part though.
What's the worst part?
The worst part is that he looks at me and he gives me one of those like, okay, don't worry, like you're done. Like he taps me out, like he relieves me of my duty. And then he looks at the 14-year-old girl who's the exchange student from Norway and says, you want to row? And then she gets there and she's just like crushing it. Like an Olympian rower, just like, boop, 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 and I'm like, oh my God, I just blew it, and that might be one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. And I blame drugs.
Let me get this straight. Not only did you get outrowed by a child, by a literal child, you had to sit there and watch her successfully crush you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
and I don't the reason I say that it's a 14-year-old girl repeatedly, I am not, I don't doubt any girl's abilities. That's not where my head's at. But to an older man from an older generation years and years ago, this is 20 years ago now. And this guy was, it looked way worse. He's like, I had to get this 14-year-old girl to do your job, buddy. That was his perspective on the situation.
To be honest with you, I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. I assumed it was just embarrassing because she was a child, an underdeveloped, didn't have muscle yet child.
And I'd have been the first one to high five her and say, that's good rowing. But it just, I know that it looked worse to an older man who's, he's from a baby boomer generation. And it was just different. So I stress that because that it's just one extra little tick in what hurt that relationship with that father, So I just looked like the biggest loser. It's sort of like the old joke about your little sister is doing a better job than you are at something. Like maybe, she beat someone up for you or something.
Yeah.
Like that bully now thinks less of you because your little sister helped, that kind of.
So let me ask you this. So first and foremost, how did this whole thing end? Like, what did your girlfriend say? Like, walk me through that quickly.
I think we just laughed it off. The girl started rowing. We did a little it was like a pleasant, we forgot about all that and we're just pleasant and just enjoyed pleasantries with each other, toured the scenery and then went back, docked the boat and went up and probably had lunch or something like that. It's just like, let's move on. That was weird. You guys are weird or this guy's weird. But everything's good now. So who cares?
So then let's go and jump right back into this very quickly. If you could retell the story, what would you change? Okay.
So, well, knowing that I'm married now to my it's not the same girl. Like this is a relationship that ended.
Are you sure?
Yeah. She's sure. So yeah, you I'm not the no regrets type. I don't have that tattoo. But there are things that I would change. And so you could change little things and still come out like the hero. So here's what we do.
Okay.
My girlfriend and I, we walk down to the beach. We have a love. I'm not going to that beach. That place is magical. Like the Marlborough Sounds are beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. She pulls out the bowl. She packs it. She lights it. She hands it to me. I I take a fake puff. I take it just in my mouth because, like, I was smoking with her for, you know, kind of for the camaraderie. I wasn't like a pothead. I wasn't like, yeah, give me all the pot, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know. So I take a fake puff, like a cigar puff, and just blow it out. Be like, oh my God, I'm so high, right?
Right.
And then we just go about the same, you know. And we go back. He walks down, and I call him sir. I maybe give him a little, like, because he was in the Army at one point. I think he had it was like an honorary thing, but he did serve. He like as an instructor status later in his life, and I kind of give him a wink and a nod, and I acknowledge, like, thank you for your service. Give him a little salute, and then we get into the boat, okay, and I look out, I identify some native trees and maybe a bird sound that I hear. I identify the species because I know exactly I've studied. I've read all the books. I'm an outdoorsman at this point.
Is that ornithology? Is that what that is?
It is. And maybe I take off my shirt and like I'm muscular but not gym toned, you know, like more like you've been chopping firewood, you know what I mean? Like kind of just bulky and a little bit like scratched up and so, you know, there's a farmer's tan, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I tie my sweatshirt around my waist, and then he asked me to row, and I say, of course, I thought you'd never ask. And then I take it and I row the boat, not just fine, but so good. I'm doing donuts in the water. Like I'm kind of like, I'm teetering to and like spinning. I'm using it as a rudder. I'm doing like, you know what I mean? Like, like Tony Hawk moves, but in a rowboat. I don't know if you could do Tony Hawk, you know, and they're just wowed by this, you know, and then maybe a speedboat goes by and the wake like hits us and knocks everybody out of the boat. But I dive in with like a knife in my teeth. There's not even a need for the knife, but I dive in and I save them all. I put them back in the boat. And then I don't know, maybe he's in the water. He gets bit by a poisonous snake, which New Zealand doesn't have. But for the purposes of this story, there's like one fell out of a plane or something, and so I pull him out of the water. I help him. I suck the venom out of his. I stitch up his wounds. I give him CPR. He doesn't even need it, but I just want to show him that I know how to do it. You know. And then I get the boat back. I row the boat back really fast.
Yeah.
Back to the dock. I dock it up. I tie it up in like, I don't know, a triple hitch, you know, like some sort of, not even
fancy knot.
Yeah, not even a boating knot, but like Celtic artwork. You know what I mean? I'm just like, how about this? You know, and it's like, oh wow, that's the, you know, it looks like a royal crest or something. And then so I carry him because he's still wounded, you know, and I had to suck the venom out. And I carry him up the hill back to the house, you know, like the bodyguard, right? And everybody can hear the song, you know, in the background, but it's not playing audibly, but like they're all hearing it in their heads and they're mouthing the lyrics at the same time. I get him back there. I wrap him in a blanket and like build a fire from rubbing sticks together, like from scratch, you know what I mean? And then I kill and cook an animal for him to eat, like, but he could see it all happening. He can't move, and he's stuck there in his seat, and he can watch me, and I'm like skinning him, like, how do you like it? Like rare or medium, you know? And it's not a protected animal or anything. I don't want to like this to backfire on me. It's like, I don't know, something in the middle ground, you know, like
a chicken.
Yeah, a chicken or a deer or something.
Venison.
Like, yeah.
I do want to point out, I think it's funny how, because you felt a little emasculated and a little embarrassed, you retell a story on where you emasculate him. I'm just pointing that out to you. I don't know if you're aware.
Here's the ending. The ending gets weird. Are you ready for it? Because it's...
Let's go. Let's hear it.
He's so impressed with me and my masculine skills now, my new masculine skills, that it actually starts to get weird with my girlfriend. and with her mom, because he's a little bit now like, that CPR was nice, and so and so there's questions all around the fire pit, that we're all around, like we're all surrounded, like, and they're all just wowed with my masculinity and my survival skills and my outdoorsman, woodsman skills. And so he's a little bit so into me that's the reason why we break up. I break up with my girlfriend but at the same exact time. So it doesn't change my like love trajectory.
Sure.
I still meet my wife, but it's just a different reason of why I break up with this girl. And that night after he goes to bed, I ask my girlfriend if she has any more weed, and then we get baked out of our gourds.
The end.
Yeah. Well, we go down to the dock late at night and we do wacky, weird things in the rowboat that we can't operate while we're high, and then the end. Yeah.
Okay. So this story ends because you drowned. Got it. Okay. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for coming on to the Revisionary podcast. Before I let you go, we have 2 traditions on this podcast. Mm-hmm. The first is we like to highlight a charity or an organization or a cause that our guest is passionate about. Mm-hmm. Do you have a charity or an organization to share with us? I
do. My charity is called Safe Place for Youth. It's also known as SPY, SPY. It's at safeplaceforyouth.org. One of my clients and a good friend, actually, Bridget Carroll, works with them. And it's basically for at-risk youths, providing them with homes and places to stay and all the types of things that they need in order to get, like, back into the workforce. And for whatever reason, if they're runaways or they're orphaned or anything like that, and they're on the streets, like, these guys help them out. It's a really good organization, and I support that because I know it, like, I don't know. I have my heart goes out to anyone who's like doesn't have a strong background and rich parents and really is like grinding or is in some sort of at-risk situation. So that's a charity that I would support.
Perfect. And the last tradition we have before we let our guests go, we like to ask them to share a quick childhood story that puts a smile on their face or generally makes them feel warm inside when they think of it. So, like, the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay. A story that puts a smile on my face. If you guys look at any of my social media, you'll see this photo of a little kid in a red jacket. And I most of the time it's some sort of favicon or thumbnail that you can't really zoom in on, but that's me basically. And that's like what I think of when I think of the real me. That's the reason it's my current background and my current profile photo and everything. And it's me like the dorkiest kid in the world in like one of those puffy red, snow jackets in the Poconos at a cabin with a mitten in my mouth, because you have to pull your mittens off with your mouth because you can barely hold anything, those stupid mittens.
Right.
And it says Goofy on it. It's Goofy from, the Disney character. And so I'm holding a mitten in my mouth and it says Goofy upside down. And I was an idiot, dorky kid. Like, I was into Weird Al and all that kind of stuff. And I had joke t-shirts, and all the people thought I was a nerd or some sort of butthead. So yeah, that's a good memory of like me being the real me, and that's why I keep it on my profile now.
Wow, that's a good story. I want to thank you for sharing that, and I also want to thank you for joining us on the Revisionary podcast. Before I let you go, do you have any last words for the Revisionaries?
Yeah, I mean, I would say don't live in the past, but if you can make the past like so much more awesome, write that story.
Okay, and where can we follow you?
You can follow me at Keith D. Graber on most of my handles. My middle name's David, so it's Keith, Keith, D as in David, and then Graber, Graber. That's on Instagram, Twitter. I'm looking for Twitter followers, trying to build an army. And then At Liar Comedy is also my virtual comedy club that I work with. And we have a lot of things going on. So you can follow At Liar Comedy too.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. You've been wonderful.
Thanks.
And feel free to say goodbye to the Revisionaries.
All right. Love you guys. Thanks for hearing my story, Revisionaries.
All right. Later, Keith.
See you guys.
The Revisionary Podcast.
So I will say, I think it's interesting because I feel like the big concern there was that he didn't want to get outmanned by a girl. And I feel like that, in my personal opinion, is not that big a deal. I mean, I feel like the bigger issue was the age thing, man. Like, you know, you're a full-grown adult. and you had what is essentially still a kid just outrow you. But I mean, I understand the circumstances behind it. But personally, that's what I thought was funniest about that entire story. But either way, I want to say thank you to Keith for joining us. And I want to say thank you guys for tuning in. You know, you Revisionaries, again, just keep coming back, and I'm here for it. So, as always, I'd like to say thank you for listening.
This is